Welcome in, everyone. It's Clips and Dip, episode 151. I'm Adam Moslin. We got Will Updike, Chuck Mockler, and a special guest in Kelli Johnson joining us from Fox 11 and Good Day LA. Coming up here on the show, we're going to talk about what dropped earlier. I think it was Chris Haynes who had it, and then Shams Charania kind of corrected it. But CP3 could be coming available, and we'll talk about the Clippers want him. We did a poll at Clippers Podcast, right?
Nope,
No,
at
at Clippers Pod. At Clippers
Adam.
Podcast is where you can hear
Not getting
us
edited
and
out.
watch us on YouTube. We appreciate you guys for hopping in here. Kelli, how are you? Thanks for doing this today.
I'm good. How are you? And thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited.
We're good. So we were reading your bio, or I was earlier a little bit, doing a little bit of background research.
Oh boy.
Ominous. Adam coming in.
Arizona State, there's no conflict, right? When the Clippers are taking on the Suns in the playoffs or anything like that, because we know you're a big Clippers fan.
Yes. You know, I was thinking, I figured this might come up. And the interesting thing about Phoenix is that a lot of people from Arizona, like who live in Arizona, they're actually from somewhere else. If you go to like a Diamondbacks game when they play the Dodgers, it feels like a Dodgers home game. And growing up, a lot of the people I went to school with, they were Laker fans. So even though you're from Arizona, doesn't necessarily mean it's like the protocol to follow Arizona sports teams. So, I mean, yes, I went to ASU. I'm a proud Sun Devil. My dream school was USC. So I've always had this desire to live in California.
R.I.P. Pat Tillman, one of my favorites ever.
Oh,
There
for
we go.
sure. Yes, much respect.
All right, Adam got the first nickname change. If you're watching on YouTube, he
The
is now the
Sleuth.
Sleuth.
Because I read the background on Kelli Johnson, our guest. That's just being a damn professional, all right?
Adam doesn't read the breakdowns for the show, but he will look into your background if you are a guest. So
I love it. That's good research. That's good journalism.
And Kelli, you put out a great video for Clips fans this
Oh,
year.
thank you.
You had people, for those of you who didn't see it, Clippers Fan Center in pictures. There's a great Russ quote kind of over the whole thing as a montage. You also put out an article that the Clippers are the 8th smartest fans in the league. I would like to take a quick poll of those who host this podcast. Adam, do you believe Clippers fans are the 8th smartest fans in the league?
No, they're number one. Just like the Sacramento Kings fans were voted that back when I was up in NorCal growing up. Because when you are a long-suffering fan base, you have to know about everything, because sometimes your team may not have that many star players. We're lucky that Steve Ballmer bought the franchise and they have the 213 connection now. But there were many suffering years for Clippers fans where they kind of had to go to games and watch the opposition and see how the stars were going to perform on the other side, because they didn't have the big name players. So it makes you a little bit more educated of a fan. That's where I'm coming from.
Okay, Will, Clippers fans, top 10 smartest in the league?
I will say this, like how many other like the majority of their fan base, how many other franchises could you say can name a prominent athletic trainer that's been with the organization for over a decade? So that's got to count for something. But I agree with Adam. Like, I think that there are a lot of well-informed Clippers fans. I do think a lot of it has come out of a weird necessity wherein, like, it's like, we got to get to the bottom of this. Like, what the hell can we do? Where do we go? How can we get out of this? So I do think that there are some educated Clippers folks out there, but unfortunately it hasn't always been like for fun. It's I think it's been out of pain.
I was going to say many Clipper fans are like honorary, like physical therapists, like knowing so much about injuries. It's like, oh yeah, I know what it is. We can probably walk into a doctor's office and know all about knees and certain ligaments.
Yeah, that was just from the Sean Livingston injury, actually.
Oh God.
So many went, unfortunately.
There's waves of injury, just clips of injuries going over my brain right now.
Chuck, you got us number one, right?
I think I'd probably go one. I liked your logic of like teams who aren't good, like their fans having to really. I'll go one. I'll go one, and then I'll go Sacramento Kings 2.
I'm not going to, I can't go one just because I feel like Clippers fans, we get to disregard the entirety of the draft because we're just not good at it. So I feel like, you know, like there's so many other fan bases. Like if you're a Pistons fan or a Rockets fan, like, you know, so much more about the draft.
This is not true. The Clippers have to know about second round picks because they've been hitting there consistently. All right.
It's so unpredictable though. It doesn't count.
Sometimes the Clippers don't even know how tall the guy they're drafting is. Shout out Daniel Ocheru and Law Murray for putting that in print, so we know that it's actually true.
Kelly, on the list, it said number 1 was Toronto, right? The Raptors fans were voted number 1.
Canadians, yeah.
They're smarter than us. That's the criteria.
They're
Canadians, so they must be
us.
better. Our education system, is that a slight?
This is going to turn into like crossfire with Adam and Guess. When we
right. And Phoenix was like number 4, which is interesting because Arizona's usually like in the bottom of like education down there with Mississippi. So that, but I think it's the ASU effect or something. You know what I mean? It's like the colleges, but
I mean Suns and 4 guy, not that smart. He was physical. He could throw hands, but come on.
He did market that. He somehow was like signing basketballs and selling them on his Instagram as like Suns and 4 guy, which,
you know, I got a DM about that guy. Somebody I know allegedly went to kindergarten with him and he was a bully in kindergarten. And I do not think we need to praise bully culture. So it seems like this guy has not learned his lesson. And that's another reason I am not a Suns fan. I'm like, we cannot praise this guy. And we're still talking about him. Yeah. So got a DM about it.
It was weird how the team like embraced it. Like they're like, Devin Booker's like, I want to give you some tickets. And it's like, okay, man, I don't. And then there was a bunch of fights at their stadium. So we haven't talked about the last season as a whole quite a bit, but we've had some people from the media on here. We've talked about it kind of off air before. A lot of people mentioned, and you covered the team and are a fan of the team, that this was one of, if not the hardest years to kind of be a Clippers fan for various reasons. Why do you think last year was so difficult? Do you think last year was so difficult? And why do we think it was so difficult, particularly last season with the Clips?
So I think I'm one of the rare positive fans, but not overly positive, if that makes sense. So I have a different perspective.
No, that's fair.
It's like, I'm not like, you hope that, we're going to the finals. But when you see, especially after the All-Star break, hey, we're not really beating teams with records over 500. And, we're celebrating when we beat, Houston. That's not necessarily a good sign. So I think, it's like one thing that I always go back to, and from what, I've seen on Twitter, is that like Lou Will, Pat Bev, Trez, that like culture, we don't necessarily have that anymore. That's kind of missing. And I think, the chemistry was off. It was the lack of effort, being so close to winning games and having those meltdowns in the fourth quarter. Give no quarter. I don't think anyone ever wants to hear that again.
There's no way they tested that.
Yeah.
There's no way they did any like focus groups or anything with give no quarter.
Yeah, absolutely not. And I think it was just frustrating knowing how much potential we have. As, the comeback clips that we got to see last season was so, we had Luke Kennard and we had, Reggie Jackson and those guys, once they left, we didn't have that anymore. It felt like the players didn't want to be there. The fans, we went into the season and we were projected to go to the finals. That was the thing. And I was like, maybe that's a curse. There were too many eyes on us. And it's just, frustrating. I went to Seattle for that preseason game. We looked so good and just seeing things just not connecting. Players just, I don't want to say it didn't seem like they want to be there, but it was just something different in the air. And that did change when Russell Westbrook came. Completely different atmosphere in the arena. But I think it's just being disappointed. It's like having, pardon me, I've been watching my niece and nephew. So, it's just like having a room full of AP students who are failing tests. It's like, what's going on, you guys? You know what I mean? It's
Dang.
like we have all this potential and we're not rising to the occasion.
So you're telling me you don't think something was born out of those wins, like Adam was talking about, after every single win on the radio?
That's called culture, something born.
I love that metaphor of a bunch of AP kids like failing the test. Like they're all really smart kids who just for some reason can't really get it going. And the optimism, like it did make sense going into the season to have optimism.
Right.
We were the on paper favorites. Everything was set up. We were going to get Wingstop, all this stuff. Adam, what do you think kind of made it so difficult? I think a little bit it was kind of more of the same. It felt like almost the breaking point for everyone's limit to how much apathy towards the regular season, how much unexpected kind of medical absences they were willing to deal with and stuff like that. It felt like it was kind of just like, it was just all too much after the year, like you said, the year before with Reggie and all that stuff.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people felt like there would be carryover from the 2021 playoff run into this
Mhm.
season. They were missing Kawhi all of last year, and that was just going to continue with bringing him back in. But then he goes out with a knee injury, and there was something that kind of flew under the radar early on in the year. The media was asking Paul George in the locker room about the 2021 Clippers and that playoff run, and he said, "It's a new year. We have to start something new." And I don't think he's wrong for saying that. I don't think you can just show up with the same team and expect the same results and pick up where you left off and win the championship this time with Kawhi Leonard. There's new players on the team. There's new philosophies. Things are going to change. And unfortunately, I think a lot of the expectations were set at such a high level. And I think that's a good thing. Don't get me wrong, but it leaves you prone to disappointment. It leaves you a little bit more open to disappointment because when it's championship or bust, and as you mentioned, the same things start to accumulate with injuries going on, them not having that continuity on the court. It just felt like, yes, more of the same from this Clippers team when we thought, okay, this is the year. This is definitely going to be our year. But I was wondering, Kelly, I don't know if we got this from you. What was the first Clippers team to disappoint you? What was the first team that you rode with?
That's a great question.
What was the impetus of you being a Clippers fan?
That's a really good question, and I'm pretty new. I'll be, perfectly honest. I came in the 2-1-3 era. When I moved to LA, that's when Kawhi and Paul George joined as well. So we all came together.
Package deal.
Package deal. Yeah. People say it was a trade just for Kawhi. They don't know that we got Kelly and PG in that whole deal.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we're all a package deal. And I grew up always an NBA fan, and I'm not going to lie. I have kind of switched teams. I mean, my favorite team growing up was that early 2000 Pistons, and who the team was in like 2019. They reminded me so much of them, that just that fight, that grit. I was like, ooh, I like them. And like, I love Kawhi Leonard. I love how he shook things up in Toronto, hoping to see him do that again in LA. And that's, one of those things you see spurts of it, right? But you don't see it consistently. And that's part of the disappointment. But Kawhi Leonard's probably my all-time favorite player. So that's how I became a fan. So he recruited me. I'm one of the new guys.
We need all the positivity we can get. We need all the rational positivity we can get. So we'll definitely take it.
But I'm not switching teams again. Don't worry. I've been a Flip Flopper in the past. I will admit that this is here to stay. Clipper Nation, just really good fan base, really sweet, and kind of going back to what you were talking about earlier, like, being the 8th smartest fans in the NBA. I think I remember before the groundbreaking at the, at Intuit Dome, and just zooming with different fans. Everybody was on time. Everyone just had so much knowledge about the game and had a passion for this team, and I think that's so admirable.
Yes, it's admirable, especially for when you talk to people who've been the fan of the team since, the LA Sports Arena days. You're like, you really stuck around.
Yeah.
Right.
Will, what made this? Well, first of all, Will, did you have a difficult year watching this team?
Absolutely.
And if so, what made it difficult?
I mean, like, there's a few things. I think overall, like, the apathy of the approach to the regular season was one of those things that I think I'd put behind me in previous years with both Kawhi and Paul George healthy. I think this year it was just especially more present because the team didn't even look all that good when both of them were playing together. There were some limited stretches where I was like, okay, I could see what this could become. But I mean, we talked about this all throughout the season. They struggled to put together multiple convincing wins, even in a sequence. You know what I mean? Like, there was never a stretch of games where you were like, okay, I'm seeing this Clippers team really start to hit its stride. And it's so funny because, like, we talk about, I feel like everything always comes back to that 18-19 season, like the year before Kawhi and Paul George came here. And like, we thought that we had like such a clear idea of what this team was, like the impetus of it. And we were adding these two players that seemed to really kind of fit that mold. And I think if we've learned anything in this era, it's just that not even just Kawhi and PG, it seems like the team as a whole is really unsure of their direction. And I think that was just like blatantly obvious this year. How many times did we talk about, what is the Clippers culture? Is there a Clippers culture? Like, did they figure something out from this? I mean, I joked about Adam talking about something being born, but like, every single time we were hoping like, okay, has this team finally figured it out? Like, do they know who they are now? Do they know what they are? Do they know how they want to play? And I think that like bled over into some things where I think a big thing that was, helping us see this Clippers team as contenders was this depth, right? Like we saw this and it was like, okay, even, let's say we only get 40 games out of Kawhi and Paul George. We have all this depth that you would think would be able to kind of lead you through the regular season. But I think with just the lack of direction for where this team is headed, that wasn't even utilized correctly. And I think that showed a lot of redundancy in those positions. And I think that got really difficult to see too, is like these players that I was excited about kind of either being misused or, in some cases like Robert Covington, not really used at all. And that was just really frustrating. It's really frustrating to watch a team still like chasing its tail in year 4. I just don't know how after that many seasons, you can't at least figure out what is the brand of basketball it is that you play. I understand Kawhi and Paul George not being here, and that obviously does affect that. And it does make roles very fluid, but it just feels like there's not an overall direction. And I think that was just on full display this year.
Kelly, you kind of raised an eyebrow there when you brought up Robert Covington. Was that one of the sore spots for you this season, not seeing him more on the court?
Were you Team Rocco?
Listen, yes, and when you see him doing the T-shirt contest, and that's the only action he's getting, it is so frustrating. And I found that when he scored like 41 points last season, I mean, it's just I want to know what's going on. Obviously, there's something that we don't know. I wish I could get to the bottom of it, and I just feel like if we're not going to utilize him, go ahead and trade him. But it's like when we talk about what direction was this team going in, and I heard you guys talk about this in a previous podcast. It seems like there was no voice in the locker room. We know that Ty Lue, he had a lot of personal stuff going on, but he still had to show up to work because he felt like he had to be there. And it's, it's like we have to accept the fact that Paul George, Kawhi Leonard, they're introverts. These are not going to be vocal leaders in the locker room. So it seems like that was very much missing. And just talking about misusing players, I mean, Terrence Mann, like what is his role on this team? We're still trying to figure that out. Love him, would like to see more of him, but it's someone who was underutilized this past season.
Do we think that Paul George would be a more vocal leader if we set up a fake podcast studio and he could address all the team as if he were on a podcast?
Maybe they need to set up a studio before the game, because it's like all this personality and he's got jokes and it's very interesting. But maybe it's that more relaxed environment. I can relate to that as an introvert, but podcast P, shout out to him. But
well, and I mean, to be fair, there are extroverts that aren't necessarily like leaders. I do think that leading a team is such a specific thing,
right?
And I do really, at the end of the day, I really feel like there's only a few players that can really command an entire locker room, and sometimes it's not always the guys you would expect. I mean, you would love for it to be your lead player or your star player, because it's kind of hard for one of those guys to pull rank. But another thing that was kind of disappointing in this, this Clippers season is I feel like we've had that leader in the locker room before at times, and then I don't know what happens with that role. Like Nick Batum this year, I don't know if it was because of he was battling health stuff and his minutes were kind of up and down. They were clearly trying to save him, it seemed like, for the playoffs or something. But it feels like guys don't really feel empowered in that locker room. And if you're not going to get it from your stars, you got to find it somewhere else. And ultimately, I think that was the biggest benefit of the Russ of the entire Russ thing, which I was super critical of. But I mean, that was what they needed.
Yeah, Russ brought a lot, which I think speaks to how this team felt about themselves. They talked about how Russ brought this belief and stuff like that, and it was like, so it wasn't here pre-Russ? Like, you guys didn't fully.
It wasn't.
No, I know, but that's what makes it so tough. Adam, you look like you have some rebuttals you maybe want to say about this team's spirit.
No, I think
also the sleuth might need to figure out what's going on with Rocco. You got to earn the nickname more.
Get to the bottom of it.
I'm gonna lodge myself in that secret hallway between locker rooms. I'm just gonna be posted up there the rest of the summer with
so weird though, because
Rocco up against the door.
Wasn't it Rocco played and then he went into health and safety, and then he did an interview where he was like, "I'm looking forward to playing more," and then Did he even get time on HBCU night? Did they give him like 6 minutes or something? He's the only NBA player who went to an HBCU. And I think they like gave him like a pity 7 minutes or something.
Yeah.
On HBCU night, which is like, dude, like
what
was
are we doing? Bizarre.
Yeah.
That kind of underscores and just epitomizes the entire season. Rocco's minutes, Terrence Mann's minutes. That says it all. And it goes back to those expectations. We thought, okay, Mann's going to take that next step. He's going to play more minutes. Rocco, after the way he performed when they brought him in last season, the 41-point performance that Kelly brought up, he's going to be even more involved. And they're going to throw out Wingstop all the time. Yeah, he's getting 11 threes every game. And none of it came to fruition. And it's just shocking and bizarre that so many things that we anticipated happening going into this season, and we couldn't check off many of them at all by the end of it.
No. Very, very weird season. We're going to take a break, and then we're going to talk about all of the weird stuff that apparently might happen in between last year's weird season and what might turn out to be a very weird next season. We have ads coming up. If they've been too loud for you, which they have for some people, go ahead and turn it down. We got ads coming up. Then we're talking Chris Paul maybe coming back to the Clippers and just a whole bunch of other randomness. Ads coming up in 3, 2, 1. All right, we are back. Episode 151 of Clips and Dip, joined by Kelli Johnson. A bunch of weird stuff happened today involving Chris Paul. For those of you listening, if you didn't know, Chris Paul used to play for the Clippers. Very important part of this team's run at some point. Some people are new. They might not know. The Suns are doing something with Chris Paul. Chris Haynes first tweeted out that he was just going to be waived, which everyone was like, this is a lot. Then Shams tweeted out that they're exploring multiple options, including a trade, stretching his contract, or waiving him, or releasing him in free agency, which is every possibility possible. And then Woj came in and kind of said that he might want to return to the Suns, but they also might be looking at trade ideas ahead of when his contract is fully guaranteed on June 28th of this month. So it truly seems like they're exploring all options. We asked Clippers Twitter, we'll get to that in a sec, if they'd want Chris Paul back, because it's not an impossibility, but we have to ask the power quad here. We'll start with the sleuth. Would you want Chris Paul back on this Clippers basketball team for the 22, what year is it? 22-23 season?
He just turned 38, but we talked about this 3 or 4 episodes ago, and I was the one guy on this show that said in the right role, I would take CP3 back. Coming off the bench, playing 15 to 25 minutes a night, he still was getting an efficient 14 and 9 assists last season. It's really more about your feelings and what vibes he brings to the locker room when it comes to CP3, because he does evoke strong emotions from Clipper fans. Because when
and his own teammates, he's kind of a prick.
He's polarizing. There's no doubt about it. I still think he offers so much, and maybe some of what the Clippers need when he's right. And that's another issue. You bring in another older guy that's injury prone, that missed the last 4 games of the playoffs for the Phoenix Suns with a groin injury. I don't know if you can rely on him. Obviously, for 82 games, we're talking about somebody that might play 50 games, and that's still with limited minutes in there. I don't think he can be necessarily your starting point guard or something like that every night. Slot him in and say, okay, the Clippers finally found their guy. It's nothing like that if you brought him in. It would have to be knowing his role and just having him in a limited role with this Clippers team. Kelly, how are you feeling about it?
Well, I don't know if you guys listened to this interview. It just came out. He was on a podcast recently, and he was saying that his daughter is getting bullied, that, she's old enough where, the kids are going up to her, making fun, not that this is related at all, but it just happened to come out pretty much within hours of one another. I'm going to keep it pretty short here. And my answer is, the Clippers already have the oldest roster in the NBA. We really need to get younger, not older. Pass for me. Thank you.
Absolutely no part of it. Oh, that's wonderful. Will, your thoughts? So far, we have one yes from Adam, and then one definite
in the right role for the right price. All right.
No, it's a no for me. I don't really see any reason to sort of like retread that ground. And I think so. I do really think one of the difficulties of like this locker room having a voice too has been finding the right personality, right? Because I do think, and you know, I don't have sources on this. I do think that there was friction between the Stars and Patrick Beverley that contributed to him not coming back and them not making a move to go ahead and sign him.
How many times last year did we and everyone else say Pat Bev would be great on this team after what was happening in Chicago? It was crazy.
I mean, you know, it just makes sense. I do think though that there is like a question of personalities, and like that was always one of my hugest criticisms of Doc was that he's not a manager of personalities, which is something you have to do in a locker room. And I don't think that he's the right guy. I don't think at this stage of his career, he's the right guy to have that voice in the locker room to pull rank, as I kind of alluded to earlier. And just, I mean, I agree with Kelly. Like I any move that's somehow getting this team even older,
way older.
I do not see it. I do not see the end game. I'm also like, I gotta be honest, like while the Russ thing did end up working out, I'm still flummoxed by this idea of like how fixated they are on a point guard. Like, why are we still doing this? Like, we keep running through the same, like
Rondo. We've had like the most point guard of point guards.
There's
like,
just,
if you look at the roster, it's insane.
There's some pretty severe restrictions on what this team can do cap wise with the 2 stars. They want to handle the ball less by all, you know, by all accounts. They don't want to be responsible for, you know, facilitating and getting the offense going 100% of the time. But with what you have available to spend, like the market out there is not exactly like a game-changing candidate. And I don't think like latching on to Chris Paul just because it's like a name is really the right move for this team. I'm not seeing it. It's a no for me.
Chuck, what if the situation is they can't re-sign Russell Westbrook? Would it make you any more interested in bringing in CP3?
Absolutely not. Someone said we should try and get both, and I wanted to jump into the road is what I wanted to do. Well, Clippers fans are also very torn on this. We asked Clippers Twitter. We got exactly 200 votes, which made it easy. Do you want Chris Paul back on the Clippers? 46% said yes. 54% said no. So we're not like.
I'm surprised it's that close. I don't know if there's
too.
like I don't know if there's like a legacy thing or something kind of tying into that, because like looking at where Chris Paul is right now, and like I said, just considering like the people in the locker room, like, do you think Paul George is going to respond really well to getting yelled at by Chris Paul like in practice? Like I don't see it.
Absence makes the heart grow fonder, okay? He's been gone for so long, guys. This was the first Clippers team that Kelly rooted for in the 2-1-3 era. A lot of people still have love for CB3, all right?
Don't bring Kelly into this. He didn't want any further. So Law Murray had a great tweet about this. He said when Russell Westbrook was going through his Lakers tribulations, the support he had from Clippers locker room was quite widespread, both before and during his Utah Jazz purgatory. Let's just say the same locker room doesn't speak on Chris Paul the same way, for what it's worth. I think it makes so much sense to not bring Chris Paul to this Clippers team because I think the 46% of people who voted yes, once you looked at the roster sheet and you saw so first of all, if Ty Lue is coaching, Chris Paul is taking Terrence Mann's minutes, right? Like, yeah, it doesn't seem like available. Terrence. Right. Yeah. When Chris Paul is available, he's probably taking Terrence's minutes. I think the people who want Chris Paul on the team would be very bummed out once they saw like the starting 5. Because I don't think Chris Paul's taking a bench role. I just don't think it's going to happen. And him starting, and we still have this weird logjam of youth with like Bones and Terrence and these guys who can play guard. I think people would be pretty frustrated.
Especially because Bones could really turn into a fan favorite, I think, with this team. What Kelly was talking about with having more of an influx of youth, they certainly need more youth. They need more athleticism. They need the coach to trust those guys. It looked like he had a lot of trust with Bones Highland. They brought him in late in the season, and he was getting run in the playoffs. And I think that surprised some people with the way he's gone about using Terrence Mann, of course. And that's also shocking because he closed games in the playoffs in 2021, Terrence Mann, and it looked like he had the nod from Coach Lou that he was going to be one of his guys, one of his soldiers moving forward. It's another one of those things like Rocco that coming into this season, we were looking for another big step from him. It didn't happen, but having him and Bones Highland, and if you don't have a veteran, if Westbrook's not able to return, if they don't bring in someone like CP3 or an older guy like Mike Conley,
it sounds like
Kyle
worst
Lowry,
case scenario.
Well, I think for a lot of people, they would prefer to just say ride with the young guys at the point guard position. You have Mann and Bones Highland, and one way to maybe force Coach Lou to have to do some of that would be, structuring the lineup in a way where they're just not an option other than going with a young guy.
Like they did at the trade deadline when they took all the point guards away.
Just also as a brief aside, we talked about like how frustrating parts of this season were. Can you imagine this season plus you have to watch Chris Paul play offense for 50 games?
Kelly, you were going to say something.
I was going to say this is who is available, in demand. So it's okay, other than Russell Westbrook and Chris Paul, Kyrie Irving, Fred VanVleet, and D'Angelo Russell. I think we're going to preferably ride with who we have. If that's who, if for some reason we can't work out getting Russ back, I think we need to work with who we have.
Yeah. Who would you prefer kind of that young? Do you want Terrence? Are you in the start Terrence camp? Or are you in the give Bones a chance? Because Bones is really fun to watch play basketball. Terrence is very good. Bones is a little more fun to watch.
I think we can have both. Bones really brings a different type of energy that we need. You plug him in and it's a completely different game. It's a faster paced game and he has that confidence. We need that, that get up and go. I think him and Mason Plumlee had some really good chemistry. We don't know what's going to happen with him, but would love to see him back as well. But, I feel like we have to figure out a way to make both of them work. And I know that we were hearing some rumblings, I think at the end of the playoffs, like, Team A, Team B, like, okay, with a healthy Kawhi Leonard and Paul George and not healthy. So I think we're potentially looking at two different rosters anyway.
Oh, that's a good call with the two different rosters thing. Speaking of Kawhi and Paul George, The Athletic, in an effort to seemingly drum up engagement on Twitter, offered a little blurb for the PG for Scoot Henderson trade. Have you seen this rumor that is really just something people made up because it works financially?
I didn't know Scoot was already drafted. That's crazy.
Right. Like, Kelly, you've seen this, I'm sure, where it's like,
I have.
Where are you at on the trade Paul George for, let's call it the number 3 pick and then what is it, Nurk and Simons?
Right. I will say as a new fan, I have learned it's just best not to speculate and just wait until things actually happen.
See, you're too rational. You're too rational to be a Clippers fan.
Tweet. I just, it's like, we were hearing stuff about Joel Embiid and like I have heard these like potential trades with Portland and it's just like nothing has happened. It's been a literal desert, you guys, like, ever since our season ended.
So we're keeping, in your eyes, you're saying no to the PG for Scoot or the 3 pick, because who knows what they would do with the 3 pick.
Right. Let's just wait and see. I need to hear more. I need to see at least a little bit of Woj, some loss, some, I need a little bit. Well, it did come from him, but I just need a little bit more rationale here.
That's legit. And now, kind of the most important thing, we're gonna close out with this one. This is the last non-option year for Paul George and Kawhi before they can opt out and sign Wonder Max. I don't know what the level of Super Max they can sign is.
Super Beta.
I don't know if it's Super Beta Max. I think, Super Sigma Max. So how would Will, we'll go to you. How would you feel if PG will be 34, Kawhi will be 32? How would you feel giving PG the second max contract through what, age 39, 38? Would it be
wait, is the other one, is it still 5 years?
I believe so.
That's what Kyrie is.
Oh my God.
Rolling over.
Yeah, Kyrie, I don't know what Kyrie's doing, but yes, one of the things he's theoretically doing is mulling over his contract.
And that's 5 years, 272, I think, that he has available.
And we would be able to offer Kawhi and PG, I think, somewhere in the 5-3 something range. God, that's so much money.
Well, so I guess here's my thing is if things continue the way that they are, I think that there's no way that, if we have another injury riddled season, if we have another postseason that doesn't have both of these guys,
knock on some wood real quick. Yeah.
I think that you roll the dice
Thank you, Kelly.
and you let the market determine what their value is. And you don't preemptively, lock into the Supermax.
That's a good point. Cause are they going to get a max? Like, are they max worthy at 34?
I just don't know why you would. And I think, obviously, with all that you've already committed to this setup and with a new arena opening, which we've talked about on here before, but I think has to be a factor. I just don't see a way in which you're already the little brother franchise in a city that you can open a new arena without at least 2 superstars in it. Like, I just don't, this can't be like the We Believe Warriors even or something. Like, it just can't, it can't be like, there's just not a big enough draw. So I think that like we're headed in a direction where it's the most likely of scenarios, because if you're in that position, really, what else do you do? Unless you do pull, the trigger on one of these like speculative trades, and then you make that Supermax someone else's problem and someone else's decision. I think that barring, some more injury stuff, it's got to be the most likely of scenarios. I just don't really see another outcome.
Kelly, are you giving out $600 million combined to these two guys when they're 34 and 32? Again, God, that is so much money.
So much money. And you know what? I think I really think about, we've got Into a Dome opening next season, and I guess 2 seasons from now, next fall. And if I'm Steve Ballmer, you're thinking, I need big names to get butts in the seats, regardless of what's happening. Both Kawhi and PG, they're local guys. They want to be in LA. They've proven that they want to be here. So I feel like we may not have a choice. And, hopefully the injury gods are kind to us moving forward. It's unlikely, but let's just, stay optimistic and hope so. But again, with that, I think business-wise, I think we need some big names for that new arena.
Kelly is not speculating at this point, per her name, which if you watched on YouTube/Clippers podcast, you'd see. Adam, I have a feeling you're going to say we should sign both of them to 10-year contracts for $500 million.
Well, the sleuth brought out his magnifying glass, and he wants to magnify the contracts as well. He wants a Magic Johnson, 20-year lifetime contract for both of these guys. No, I think what you guys are saying is completely accurate. It's more likely than not, especially after what Lawrence Frank said, the postseason interview where he said, we're committed to these guys long term. And I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, Chuck, but their extension eligible this summer, so it could be something that we're not waiting for after this year, but it could be some news that drops within the next couple of months that they have signed a 3-year or a 4-year extension or something like that.
3, I would love. Give me the 3-year extension all day.
The one thing I will say is,
no, thank you.
Someone brought this up regarding Paul George and the Blazers and his trade value right now. I think it's higher than people realize because
definitely.
Lack of free agents that are available this summer.
Bad free agent.
He actually would be the biggest name out there. It would be a trade, but still being dangled out there if that's the scenario with Portland. So I don't know if it's as crazy that a trade could go down as maybe even I thought, 3 weeks ago or a month ago when we first talked about this, because to me, it's still, you're better with Paul George. You have a better chance to win a championship. What does the number 3 pick do for you with trying to win this year? But if you're saying, okay, we want to move on from the 2-1-3 era, that could change things. So I don't know. I think teams may be calling or asking and inquiring with the Clippers more than we realize.
That's a good call. Yeah.
I also got to say too, I as a person am pretty reactionary, and I've been I've been a little bit over the 2-1-3 era for a while.
Change the nickname.
It's just watching Denver this year, right? I think that while it's different, and obviously they're a much younger team, I still think that you can retool around the same core if there's a definitive direction and things fall your way, and all of a sudden the conference is wide open, and obviously they're tied up right now, but a title is within view. And I do think that there is something to while it's a little hard to stomach, thinking about the end of those contracts, 2 more good seasons. I mean, just 2 more better even than what we've had. And, you're like you're just a couple of things falling the right way away from getting 1 championship. And that's really all you need. If Steve Ballmer can open this new arena with 1 championship, he can blow the whole thing up. It doesn't matter at that point. They could trade for picks and completely rebuild at that point. It completely changes the entire franchise. So I don't love the idea, despite it being the most likely scenario, but I will say that there is something to, if you can stick with something and figure it out and things eventually fall your way, it could still be a different outcome.
Because you brought up the finals, does anyone here feel like the Clippers in a 7-game series fully healthy couldn't beat the Miami Heat? When I see the Miami Heat beat Denver in Denver the other night, it makes me think they're not this crazy Golden State Warriors from 2017 team with Kevin Durant. The Clippers, I still think, would have had a chance healthy against the Denver Nuggets. And if you get past them, look, you get an ace seed that meets you in the NBA Finals. I don't think it's that crazy to run it back and hope for better luck, as Kelly was talking about earlier with injuries.
Yeah, I think the hoping for better luck thing is where people are just tired, which I kind of
But the other side of that is just hoping to make the playoffs in a rebuild. Is that what you want? The grass is always greener.
I mean, that's the issue. I do want that because the grass is always greener. And in my head, that scenario would go perfectly. And we'd be the 8th seed in the final. I don't know. I think the Clippers versus this Heat team, part of me thinks the Heat would demoralize them by kind of doing all the things the Clippers kind of say they're about and the hustle and stuff like that. But this Heat team has a hustle and determination that's greater than any point we saw with the Clippers last year.
My favorite hustle trait is just absurd 3-point shooting. That's the best.
I would love that.
That's the best hustle trait ever.
Doesn't happen to us.
They willed it. I'm sorry, but I've seen Kawhi Leonard beat a much better Philadelphia 76ers team with Jimmy Butler, and he has wrecked him in his career. I think the Clippers would win that series. They still would have to get there. They'd have to get by Denver. That's the real issue. I'm just saying, when you see the Miami Heat being able to beat Denver in Denver, I think that was their first home loss of the playoffs. I don't think there's that insurmountable of an opponent to overcome in the West right now. It still has a window that's open for the Clippers to try to find a way to crash through, like Chris Farley.
Kelly, next year, is it going to be Clippers versus the 8th seed?
We'll see what happens, but it's we're talking about Denver, but let's not forget how great Sacramento is. We don't know what Golden State's going to do. It's the West is always wide open. So even, whatever moves we do, other teams, they're doing moves as well. So I think that's something to keep in mind. And, we see how young Sacramento is. I think they're only going to get better. They've got a chip on their shoulder now. They have a lot to prove. So it's not just Denver, you guys. So we'll see what happens. But that's why the regular season is going to be that much more important.
Yeah, we need people who care in the regular season. It's funny, too, because wide open, I think when people hear the phrase, the conference is wide open, there's an idea that it's not as good as it usually is, where the West is wide open in the sense that there's just 12 really good teams. So anyone could be the top. It's not like there's it's wide open. It's kind of messy. It's wide open in the sense that everyone is really good for the most part. Man, I know it's only June 7th, but I just want basketball to come back so we can actually try it out.
I'm ready for October. I'm other people, they're ready for Halloween. I'm just ready for I'm ready for the season. It's always that withdrawal you kind of go through. It's I miss Clippers basketball. I've been watching highlight reels at the gym, and the Clippers just posted one today, season highlights with everybody, and it's a walk down memory lane. And hopefully they even had some John Wall plays in there. It's oh man, what could have been, but
Man.
We have it. I think, when you talk about, Miami, the one you can tell that these guys are brothers. They genuinely love to play with each other. And I think that's a big thing that we're missing. And that's something that we need to get back. Chemistry is so important.
And don't get me wrong. When I talk about the Heat, their chemistry and culture and the way they're peaking right now is off the charts. They're great. They could end up somehow winning this series. They win tonight. They're up 2-1, and they already have home court advantage back in their favor. I just feel still a lot of it comes down to talent. And that's why the Clippers could come into that first game with Kawhi Leonard in Phoenix and just punch them in the mouth like that. They are that good. If they're fully healthy, they're certainly a more talented team. They have to gain some of that other experience and culture and fostered, just a little bit more of a direction, as we talked about earlier, that this franchise needs to go in and maybe find the right guys for the locker room to help with leadership. But I don't think they're as far away as some people believe they are, I guess is where I'm coming from.
I think we need the sleuth and not speculating to go give the team a pep talk in the offseason is what I genuinely think.
They're not listening to that.
That about wraps everything up. Kelli, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for the work you do as a Clippers fan at Good Day LA. We need more Clippers representation out there.
I really try. That is my mission. You talk to anyone in that newsroom, they're like,
yes.
Oh, so trust me, I'm trying to fight the good fight. Of course, in my role, I have to be as fair as I can. Got to cover the Lakers too. It is Los Angeles, but
sure.
Yes, I am trying, you guys. I'm doing my best.
That is wonderful. Where can these wonderful people find your work? Where they can see you pushing the agenda for the Clippers?
So usually, I'm a tweet. I have been quiet on social media because there is the sadness. I'm taking a break. NBA Twitter.
Never a bad idea.
Twitter was pretty toxic this last season. I don't know.
Oh, it was terrible.
Oh my God.
Horrible.
It was mostly Will.
I had to take a step back, when the fans were fighting
Good
with each
for
other. I was
you.
like, I can't, you guys. But anyway, so yeah, Twitter, you can find me at Kelli Johnson TV, Kelli with an I. And on Instagram, you can follow my fitness journey at just Kelli Johnson. And yeah, you can read my work on foxla.com.
There we go. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. It was wonderful to have you. We are going to be back next week with Law Murray slated to be on deck. We got a bunch of wonderful guests.
I should probably text him back and let him know that little reminder. Hey, Law, we already teased you out on the last episode.
Yes.
You better come on and not embarrass me.
The sleuth
and
the scheduler.
Tape recorder has made an appearance in like every single video I've posted. If you see
yeah.
a red tape recorder, that is his. He's a good guy. That'll be fun. I look forward to watching it.
Yes, Law rules. Please support all
He's
the beat
awesome.
writers. Support everyone who works for the Clippers. So you can support us by giving us some reviews. Will, where could these people review this podcast if they felt so inclined?
You can review us over on Apple Podcasts or on Spotify. We'd really appreciate it. You can listen to us on either one of those platforms. We're also on Google Podcasts. We're on Stitcher. We're on Deezer. We're on Amazon Music. Anywhere you listen to podcasts, you can listen to the show. Check us out on YouTube. That's youtube.com/Clippers Podcast, I think. If not, you're missing out.
You absolutely are. Adam, anything to send these wonderful fans off in the middle of their week to?
No, I just want to correct myself from earlier and say it one more time. At Clippers Podcast on Twitter, at Clippers Pod on YouTube.
Opposite.
You got it wrong again.
Damn it!